The leader's journey is an opportunity for you to think about what are your unique leadership characteristics, and then once you identify those characteristics, how can you use them to make a difference in your community? I'd like to highlight an important piece of that leadership journey, learning more from leadership profiles, learning more from those who have come ahead of you to be able to glean some key leadership lessons on how to build and sustain social change. So if we think about a profile of superheroes for justice, there are some commonalities. Of course, first, that their commitment to service leads them to get involved, to roll up their sleeves and make a difference. That they're good listeners, that they're listening to the challenges that are impacting their neighbors, their friends, their family members. And in that same piece, that they're team players, that they find ways to work together to bring forth change. How can we as a community bring our minds and our hearts together to creatively solve complex problems? And importantly, as well as the idea of that leadership is not just about one, but it's how do you inspire others to keep the cycle of leadership moving forward. And then it's also rooted and based in values of integrity and respect. So I'll take just a moment to share with you about some of the leaders who have inspired me on my leadership journey. First, we have Dr. Onegari Mati. I highlight her because she gives us an important lesson. It's one thing to see a problem, but it's another thing to see a problem and then create a solution. So she reminds us, until you dig a hole, you plant a tree, you water it and make it survive, you haven't done a thing. You are just talking. So she's saying that the manifestation of your leadership is through action. So we know her as the founder of the Green Belt movement and that she was fighting for environmental justice. So she started with planting just one tree, but she knew that important lesson that we talked about, inspiring others to lead and serve. With planting one tree, she inspired other mothers, other grandmothers, other aunts, other daughters to get involved and start planting trees in her home country of Kenya and also around the world. To date, the Green Belt movement has planted over 50 million trees. Next, we highlight Charles Hamilton Houston. We know him as laying the groundwork for the case today that we know as Brown versus Board of Education. And he reminds us as leaders that we should be a mouthpiece for the weak, that we should be giving voice to the voiceless of many of the challenges that go unseen, unnoticed. How can we help to solve those issues? And he takes it a step further, and he says we also should be a sentinel. So that's related to being a guard, standing on guard against things that are wrong, so that we as leaders are constantly moving forward to make sure that we're getting to the root of injustice and that we're helping to create and build a more just and inclusive society. Next, we have Ida B. Wells, and she gives us a sense of inspiration. When I think about her, I think about the power of writing for justice, that she used her pen and paper to be able to tell the stories of everyday people and help to highlight how to bring forth change and make a difference in our nation and even in her community. So she said the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And she did just that as a journalist, an activist, and also the author of Red Record. Red Record, she helped to document the history of lynchings in America. Next, we have Ella Baker. Ella Baker, we know her as someone that also was instrumental to the civil rights movement, that she was training and inspiring the young people. And she said, give light and people will find the way. And what she was saying that as leaders, make sure that you're inspiring others. Make sure that you're teaching key lessons. That way, everyone can find their place, find their voice in bringing forth change and get involved. Next, we have Paul Robeson. We know him as an athlete, as an actor, a lawyer, a singer, really truly a modern day Renaissance man. And he said the answer to injustice is not to silence the critic, but to end the injustice. So he reminds us as we're leading change, as we're getting involved in our community, to get to the root causes of the issues, of the injustices, of the inequities. And then when we engage in, as I talked about earlier, the power of problem solving, that way we're not just addressing the symptoms of an issue, but we're getting to the core of it to eliminate the issue, not just for today, but for tomorrow and for generations to come. Next, we have Shirley Chisholm, who dared in 1972 to declare that she was unbought and unbossed when she decided to run for the nation's highest office. And she said, you don't make progress by standing on the sidelines. You make progress by implementing ideas. So here's my call to action for you. What are some of the ways that you can move from the sidelines and move into action? Many of you have already done this by casting your vote in your primary and national elections. You've done this by being counted in the U.S. Census, by volunteering in your community. But what are some of the other ways, some of those ideas that you have that could help to bring forth change and meaningful change? So my challenge for you today is to make sure that you're learning about some of those leaders who have come ahead of us and learn about some of the lessons on how you can lead change in your community in a meaningful way. So make sure that you study the history of a leader who is passionate about an issue that you're passionate about, and learn more about how you can use some of those same skills, some of those same tools to make an impact and lead change. Thank you.